Listen up, cadets. Grab your badges, strap on your service weapons, because it's time for LCPOD, the Internet's #1 TJ Hooker podcast, bringing you a weekly look at the roughest cases and the toughest callers of one Sergeant Thomas Jefferson Hooker. I'm your host, Captain Kaliban, and I'd take a teddy bear over a clock radio any day. The teddy bear is better for target practice. My partner against crime is, of course, the author of Samurai Shortstop, Prisoner B3087, Project 1065, and many other books for teens. His newest book, Refugee, is out on July 25th of this year. It's Alan Gratz. Alan, welcome back to The Beat.
Hey, thanks. I'm glad to be back.
Well, as you remember, last week in The Mumbler, Hooker and Romano were on the trail of a gang of armored car thieves, but this time the stakes are more personal for both the victim and for Hooker himself. This week, we're talking about Vengeance is Mine.
Yeah, I love this episode. Beyond just the how great this episode is, Leonard Nimoy, the guest star this week, was on one of my favorite shows when I was a kid, In Search Of. I don't know if you remember that show, but it was fantastic.
Oh, sure.
All those unexplained mysteries and stuff. I really dug that. So he was the voice on that show, and I was really excited to see him pop back up in this show.
I really loved him on In Search Of, and of course, I remember him from Mission Impossible as well. He's really great on that.
Oh, yeah, totally. And he's also a guest star in one of the Columbos, a good episode of Columbo.
Oh, really? Okay, I'll have to check that out. Yeah. Well, we are talking about Vengeance is Mine. This is the 16th episode of the second season of TJ Hooker, and of course, it has a very special guest star, Leonard Nimoy. We did talk about him briefly. I don't remember if you remember a few weeks ago, because he directed the Decoy, episode 14.
The Decoy, that's right, yeah.
But this time he is in front of the camera playing Police Lieutenant Paul McGuire, a former partner of Hooker. And let's be honest, he's another in a long line of former partners. But
I know, right? Yeah, we meet so many.
But unlike most of his partners, he doesn't get shot in the first act of the show, so Hooker has somebody to run off and avenge. We can get to that in a bit, though. Alan, we talked last week about my history with the show and how I grew up watching TJ Hooker, but can you remind the fans of your connection to the program?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I grew up watching Hooker as well. My mom and dad were both hookers, though my dad preferred the term hookie, not hooker. Sure. My mom, though, she definitely identifies as a hooker.
Yeah.
And so I grew up watching that with my parents, and then really came full circle when I got to write a young adult novel about TJ Hooker when he was at the police academy, which was pretty awesome.
Yes.
That was Police Academy Hooker with a Heart of Gold.
Yes.
So I was really thrilled to come back in, to be a fan for so long, and then to finally be a part of really the official Hooker canon was pretty awesome.
Can people still get Hooker for the Heart of Gold?
I think it's only available now on Kindle.
Okay, that's possible. Yeah, or check your remainder bin, I suppose.
So,
I think that all hookheads across the world can really identify with a background like that. We all grew up watching the show. I did on Saturdays in its syndication. I'm a little too young to remember it, but it really hooked me, I guess you could say.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
But let's get to the answer for last week's trivia question. Of course, the question was, where did Corrigan used to moonlight as a stock car racer when he was with the SFPD? And Twitter user 4Adam3000 was the first to come up with the correct answer, which is, of course, Oakland Speedway.
Oh, good.
We get that information in Corrigan's first appearance in the episode Payday Pirates. This is the one where Fran Hooker gets pistol whipped into blindness over her bank deposit.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was a rough one. But we'll be covering that episode in a few weeks, so we can't give that away just yet.
Right.
And now we'll get to this week's trivia question, and it goes like this. Before she's kidnapped by white slavers in the episode Carnal Express, episode guest star Trisha Noble sings at a nightclub with Hooker in attendance. What is the name of the number she sings?
Ooh, good question. All right, I won't say anything because I know that's for next week.
That's right. Good. Yeah, so if you have the answer to that one, just send it to us at our Twitter at LCPOD. It's a tough question. It's tough but fair, like Hooker himself.
That's great, yeah.
Officer Gratz, can you give me a rundown of what happens in this episode?
Oh, right. Okay, so in this episode, we have a former partner of TJ Hooker shows up, Paul McGuire, and they're on a bus. And they're talking about the old times. They're reminiscing. Right. They're telling some jokes, and then they get a call on a possible rape victim, and they go and find out. Of course, it is Paul McGuire's daughter, Val, who has been raped, and she thinks she knows who it is. She thinks it's this guy who's in her jazzercise class,
right?
And so her father swears that vengeance will be his. And so does Hooker. Hooker swears, I'm going to kid this guy for you. But Hooker goes about it by the book, And her dad, Paul McGuire, he breaks a few of the rules trying to bring this guy to justice. And that's going to make Hooker and McGuire butt heads along the way.
That's right. And their friendship is put to the test.
Yeah, it really is. It strains their friendship.
Yeah. Well, that was an exemplary recap there.
Thank you.
Let me just talk about some of those particulars I said before. The facts of the case. This episode first aired in February of 1983. The writer is named Alison Hawke, and she was a prolific writer in the 80s and 90s on TV. She wrote for other cop shows. She wrote 4 episodes of Cagney and Lacey. She also wrote 3 episodes of Hunter, Stephen Cannell's show. But we don't want to waste too much time talking about Hunter on this show.
No, I mean, that's we'll stick with the good stuff.
Yeah. If you want to hear more about Hunter, you can check out our sister podcast, Watching Dryer, the Hunter podcast. But back to Hooker.
Right.
She was also a writer on the game show Press Your Luck.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, no whammies.
Right. I missed that show.
And the crazy thing is, like, when I looked her up and I saw that she was a writer on that show, I was like, wait a minute, but it's an unscripted game show, right? Or was it?
Yeah, it makes you think about, right, exactly. It makes you think about, like, do they need writers on a game show? I suppose you probably do.
Maybe they write the questions, but I think maybe she was writing, like, some of the no whammy stuff.
Sure. Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah. I think every TV show technically has a writer. Reality shows, of course, have writers as well, but that's a different question. The episode is directed by Phil Bondelli, who was a veteran TV director of the time. I think he worked on over 23 episodes of Chips. And, of course, he directed 4 episodes of this show. Vengeance is Mine, of course. The Obsession, which was actually in the 5th CBS era of the show. Terror at the Academy.
Right.
And also Exercise and Murder, which is one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that on a future show. Stacy goes undercover as an aerobic dancer to foil jewel thieves Judson Scott and Robert Davi. But we got a couple weeks before we get to that one.
Yeah, I love when she goes undercover. Like those are my favorite.
Yeah. The week's special guest star, of course, as we mentioned, is Leonard Nimoy. And let's look at our villain for this week. Let's look at his rap sheet. It's attorney Larry Foster, serial rapist, and Will Forte's dad.
Oh, yeah.
He certainly has more than a spitting image of Will Forte.
He does, yeah.
He's played by Randy Powell, a character actor of the 70s and 80s. Randy and his eyebrows played a lot of bad guys. His first major role was Francis in the Logan's Run TV series, which didn't last
I remember
that long.
Yeah.
He also had a long run in Dallas as the slimy Alan Beam, and he had a supporting role in the film Battle Truck.
Oh, Battle Truck, nice.
That takes me back, yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
And he's pretty greasy. I mean, when this guy asks, hey, do I look like a rapist? The casting director's answer was a big yes.
Basically, right? Yeah. I mean, they're like, you look exactly like a rapist, so we're casting you.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's just get the hood on him and we're ready to go. I'm always amazed when you watch T.J. Hooker, the young actors you see that'll one day be something big. Somebody's always playing a thug, and then it's like, oh, holy crap, that's like Robert Davi, for instance.
Yeah.
Randy Powell sadly never really got that big.
No, he never really broke out, did he?
No.
Yeah.
But he does a great job here as the creepy guy who's the only man in a women's aerobics class.
Yeah, pretty weird. And the leers he's giving her as they're jazzercising are pretty obvious leers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the director in this case, Bondelli, definitely said, just give me more. More
just
leer.
Play it up. Yeah.
And then if that doesn't work, we'll have you just, ooh, sweet Val, ooh.
Yeah. So his sweet Val routine. When he attacks another woman later on, he uses the same thing with her name.
That's his bit.
I guess that's his thing. Maybe that's what does it for him. And,
it's a weird MO, but of course MO is important to this episode and the way it all falls out.
Right, and according to Hooker in this episode, MO spells pattern.
That's right. Yes,
it doesn't spell Mo; it spells pattern.
That's right. Another great Hookerism. Speaking of Val, this week's victim is played by Michelle Tobin. Michelle didn't have much of a career past '83, although she did make an appearance on The Love Boat, and I think she was actually on Hunter as well. There is a great interview with her about her short career as a day player on television in the '80s on another podcast, the podcast of Matthew Starr. She talks mostly about being on Matthew Starr, but also a little bit about T.J. Hooker. So listeners should check that out.
Oh, good, yeah. I also wanted to give a call out to, while we're going through the cast, there's a person who plays a very small role. So Betsy Palmer plays the character Ann Armstrong. And speaking of people who did go on to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's her. She's Pamela Voorhees in Friday the 13th,
that's right.
Like Jason's mom.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's one of those where you're watching this show and you're like, oh wow, you went on to do something else. That's really cool. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people have passed through the doors of T.J. Hooker on the way to stardom.
Of course.
Well, like you said before, this is an inversion of sorts for Hooker in this episode, because he is usually the guy who is Captain Sheridan's yelling at him for breaking the rules.
Right.
But now he's got to rein in McGuire, who's mad with vengeance. And so it's a side that we don't always see of Hooker, where he's the one who has to do it by the book and toe the line.
Yeah, I really like that about this episode. I mean, it gives William Shatner a different role to play. You know, somebody. So now he has to rein it in. He's not the loose cannon that we've come to love, and it puts him in the place of doing the real hard police detective work. And I actually really like in this episode how he really does put together a case. He's got to be frustrated every time he takes something to the DA and says, "We've got evidence. We think we've got this guy nailed." The DA is always like, "I don't think it's enough yet.
Right.
I don't think it's enough." I'd be like, dude, I mean, like, how much do you need? The first victim identified him. We've got another victim who's really ready to identify him. I mean, there's all this evidence building up, but he's really, really reluctant to pull the trigger, so to speak. And that's what, of course, prompts Paul McGuire, the dad, to take justice into his own hands.
Yeah, and the DA does really push it this week. I feel like, and we can talk about like procedure on cop shows and on TJ Hooker a little bit later, but the way that the DA really wants, they set it up for the audience really well. For audiences who are used to watching Starsky and Hutch or I think Hunter, speaking of Hunter again, we keep talking about Hunter. Hunter kills, I think, every single suspect. Like the last act of the show.
Worry about the court case because he just executes them.
Exactly, right. And, TJ Hooker is guilty of that every once in a while himself. Yeah, but they really do set it up pretty well. And they establish well that, Hooker has a staunch moral code. It might not cleave exactly to what his superiors or what the courts or the DA wants. But it's his code, and he won't brook anybody bending the law too far, as he feels McGuire's doing in this case. But my question to you is, does Hooker have a leg to stand on, though? Now, this isn't really real life. This is television. Right. We enjoy when Hooker jumps on a car and rides it for weeks into the next
for a week and a half. Or jumps on a helicopter.
Exactly right. And so, and as I said before, Hooker's definitely solved a lot of cases with his gun. Do you think that he can really point the finger at McGuire in this case? I mean, this guy's daughter has been attacked.
Yeah, right. I know if they were to reverse the roles, you have to think that Hooker would do the same thing, right? I mean, like, he is a guy who is not going to let the law stand in the way of justice, of meting out justice and bringing his man. Bringing in his man and getting his guy.
Yeah, if something happened to Chrissy, his daughter, you'd have to imagine that it would be very similar.
Yeah, right. I mean, so I think we could have definitely seen that. So no, I'm with you. I think that put in the same situation, Hooker goes out and takes this guy down. I mean, like, finds him in a stairwell and just pops a cap in him. Yeah. I mean, and I think would totally get away with it.
Possibly, yeah. Hopefully, Romano would be there to maybe play the role that he's playing for McGuire in this situation.
Right. Or plant some evidence that'll get him off.
Yeah, or that too. Yeah, that's more fuel for my Hooker /fix.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
The kill count. Speaking of killing people, the kill count's pretty low this week, with Hooker only killing 2 armed robbers in the opening sequence while he's saving McGuire. And of course, not killing the suspect is the whole point of the episode's ending. So I think it all works out pretty well.
Right. Again, it's one where this time the writers maybe got tired of just killing off everybody and decided, let's try and protect this one. But while we don't have any we have a low body count. We got some guys at the beginning, some criminals who really get theirs at the beginning. Oh, and which is a nice moment too, like in that bust before the rape, before the episode really gets going. They're pulling the sting on criminals who are trying to like knock over a liquor store, right. And the guys, they chase them down, they pin them down. The crooks are in their car, they're screeching away. They get them pinned, and the guys come out with shotguns. These liquor store robbers are like trying to shoot the cops down, and it's like Hogan's Alley out there.
Right.
And Romano like tackles one, and I think maybe Hooker shoots one. He gets his shot in, but this time, weirdly, he doesn't kill him.
Right.
And he comes up with his shotgun ready to kill Paul McGuire, and that's when Hooker jumps in and saves his life. And they talk about how 17 years ago, he did the same thing for him, another partner that he's helped out in the past. And so, I mean, it's good bonding at the beginning, but we also have some gunplay, which we miss in the third act of this one because we got to save the guy.
Right. Yeah. And let's talk about the third act, but actually let's talk about those tense scenes that we get between McGuire and Hooker. I'm thinking especially of the one where Hooker confronts McGuire on the track when he's running on the track at the academy after McGuire has broken into Foster's apartment, stolen the gun, and then planted it at the original crime scene. Screwing up the collar that Hooker was setting up with the DA.
Right, like he actually did it right. Like Hooker had it right and got this stuff. Yeah.
And they have a great tense scene on the track there where Nimoy is jogging, and of course we all know Nimoy can't jog. There's no way.
No, not quite.
The guy can't breathe.
Awkward sort of walk run. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The COPD is not good for that. But anyway, they have this great confrontation, and I remember at the time, even as young as I was, that this was on TV a lot. Like I would see news reports about how these two great actors were finally going to come together, and I think they must have sent a film crew to film them filming that, because I remember seeing snatches of that scene on the news when I was a kid.
Interesting. Oh, okay. I don't remember that. That's cool.
Yeah, but that's
I really like the dialogue here. Like Hooker finds McGuire. He's running laps, and he's like, "Hey, Hooker, what's up?" And Hooker's like, "My back, Paul.
Right.
You're my friend, and I'd like to save you from a lot of grief." I mean, it's some real hard-hitting dialogue right here where Hooker has to basically call out a best friend and say, like, "I know you're planting evidence, and I can't let you do this. Like, we got to do this the right way."
That's right. Yeah. And also, McGuire's back gets up too, and he socks Hooker right in the face. And it shows you how much he respects McGuire, and he really wants to get through with it to him, because if anybody else had just knocked Hooker in the face like that guy'd be on his ass. But Hooker just looks at him.
Yeah. He catches the next punch, right? He punches him once, then Hooker catches the next one, because he's not going to let him do it again, but he's not going to hit him back because it's his old partner.
Right.
But he says, you're pushing your luck, Paul. And maybe this was the inspiration for Press Your Luck, because Allison Hawke wrote that. So, pushing your luck. Or maybe she just borrowed the line from Press Your Luck. But, it's this great tense moment, where you think, like, Hooker would be totally justified in punching this guy back, because it's McGuire. It's Nimoy's character that's really been the one who's messing everything up here.
Yeah, he takes a whammy in the face.
Yeah, he does take a whammy, and that's right.
But he keeps ticking. Yeah. And of course, then there is their tense confrontation at the end of the episode. And I love that we're talking, of course, when McGuire is finally fed up, even though Foster is behind bars, and he goes and gets him out. And he takes him to a zoo, which I thought was amazing, because this scum's an animal for what he did to his daughter.
Oh, maybe that's why. Yeah. Maybe that's what the writer was trying to do. Yeah.
Well, also maybe the location scout just found a cool abandoned zoo to shoot in, but
that is also possible. Yeah. This follows a car chase that's about as thrilling as the O.J. Simpson Bronco chase, and he crashes through a chain link fence, maybe into an abandoned park or a zoo. But you're right, there are cages, and then we have this really tense moment, and this is something I wanted to discuss with you, because I've always had questions about this since I was a kid. Like, Hooker and McGuire are wrestling for the gun, right? Like McGuire's got the rapist. He's got him at gunpoint. He takes the gun off him for just a second, and Hooker jumps him. Hooker jumps Paul McGuire, and so they're wrestling for the gun, and then the gun goes off.
Right.
And I remember as a kid thinking, oh my God, did Hooker get shot? Is he dead? But then, did Paul McGuire get shot? Is it Nimoy's character that's been shot? But apparently neither of them is shot. I don't know. It's unclear. What do you think is going on here?
That's plagued me for years. And if I ever got William Shatner in a room, there's one question that I want to ask him, and it would be, what was happening there? What was going on?
Yeah.
In the script, maybe originally that's how they wanted Paul to go out. Maybe he was shot with his own weapon, and then maybe later on they thought that no, that's we need more than that, and then we get the the confrontation where he's got to talk him down. Which I think is a little more emotionally satisfying, especially for the denouement of the show, where we get to see him reunited with Val, and it looks like he'll probably see. He might do a little time. He'll definitely lose his badge, but at least they're back together. Yeah. But I just don't know. It is one kind of uncharacteristic misstep, I think, in the sort of the pacing and the action of the episode.
Yeah, it makes you think. In that moment, we've seen this moment has been copied by so many other shows and movies since then, where two people are wrestling for a gun and it goes off, and then one of the people, you don't know which one, but then one of them slumps down dead, and you realize who took the bullet.
Right.
And I kept waiting for like one of them to slump over.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it just like goes in the concrete or something. But maybe the point is that it's what wakes Paul McGuire up from his stupor, like that he's been so hell bent on vengeance that like, you know, and he's been threatening the rapist with the gun. He's been threatening Hooker with the gun. But was he ever really going to pull that trigger? Because like, if he's really this guy that Hooker respected and was great friends with once, then you got to think that even though he really wants to drag this guy into a cage and shoot him, that maybe he couldn't. Maybe he was never going to be able to.
Right.
You know, and maybe he had to
Yeah.
have this. You know, when the gun goes off, that's when he breaks and realizes I couldn't have done this.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. And I think the episode, the script, and also Nimoy's acting does a great job of really showing his frustration. We always get this from Hooker week to week because he's so frustrated about, you know, the maggots who get the system lets off, and we get to see it in those words in somebody else's mouth. And I think as a cop, as a hard driving cop like Hooker or McGuire, you get used to having to fight against, you know, not only the bad guys, but the good guys as well. You know, the captain's trying to keep you from doing your job. The DA is trying to keep you from doing your job. And so Hooker and the police department becomes an enemy to McGuire in this.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. I mean, I think that he's trying to get it done, and he sees every man is his enemy until that gun goes off and he realizes, you know, how far he's gone.
Kind of breaks the fever dream. And
Sure.
and what we get to see here too is Nimoy, like you said, I mean, showing us the full gamut of emotions. I mean, it's a shame he wasn't on a show where he could be like really emotional because he's so good at it. You know, I mean, like he's such a powerful actor, and he shows us the, you know, ranges from being kind and caring with the scenes with his daughter and chummy and friendly with Hooker and laughing at the beginning and, you know, telling jokes and reminiscing, to being this really vengeance driven, angry character. And it really shows, you know, what an emotional actor he is, and how he brings that to all of his roles.
Yeah, he's got a really great range, and it's on full display here. Well, I want to talk about the villain really quick because we are talking about this confrontation, and of course they're struggling over the gun. They're doing all this. Why doesn't Larry just run?
Yeah, and where's Romano?
That's true. Yeah.
I was like, why doesn't the bad guy run away? And where's Vince? Like Vince, he loves to like to take flying leaps at people, you know, and he's there. I mean, he was in the car. So like while Hooker and McGuire are struggling for the gun, why doesn't he do one of his patented flying takedowns, and take down the criminal? I guess they really wanted to just really focus on that Hooker McGuire struggle.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Also, maybe he was still talking to Crystal about Hooker's bank account too.
That is also possible. So that brings up, of course, the running gag of the episode. As you know, like almost every episode of T.J. Hooker has this element, some running gag. It lightens things up because, look, Hooker dealt with some really hard-hitting stuff, like white slavery and prostitution, and so you've got to have a little levity in some of these episodes, or it would just be so dark. So we get this great recurring gag about Hooker's his bank has misplaced his money, or keeps getting the statements from somebody named T.R. Hooker, instead of J. Hooker, and it's this, and of course Romano, who has the never-ending string of girlfriends, from episode to episode. This week's girlfriend du jour is one who's a bank, I guess, not a teller, but like a somebody who gives out loans at a bank, or like opens accounts at banks, and so he wants to get Hooker's business. What is that great line? He says like Hooker says, like, what do I get? And he's like, oh, you get a clock radio. Right. And he's like, oh, really? And he's like, what do you get? And he's like, oh, I get something better than a clock radio. Right. And, nice, Vince. We know what you're talking about right there. There's a little bit of something extra if Hooker signs this. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, here it is. Yeah. Hooker says, I get a clock radio. And Romano says, yeah, you should see what I get.
Right.
Rimshot. So, that's some good stuff. But the weird thing, of course, is that in this episode, because it's so dark and so personal, both for Paul McGuire and Val, but also for Hooker. Like Hooker he tells us that he took McGuire and his wife to the hospital the day that Val was born. That's right. a part of her life since she was born.
Right.
And so it's a little weird that right in the middle of sort of tracking down the rapist who attacked her, we have these moments where they start joking about the clock radio. So I don't know, maybe in these cases the levity was there to, to give us a break in the action. But sometimes I felt like, oh man, guys, focus. We need to get back to catching this rapist.
Sure. Yeah. But that's characteristic of Hooker, I think. That's prime Hooker, because
he's able to switch gears. I mean,
absolutely.
Be laughing about something 1 second and be like the hard nosed and nose to the grindstone.
Yeah, you got to have a little bit. I mean, this isn't Hunter here. You got to have a little bit of that.
No, you're right. Hunter was too dark. I mean, this has got to have that fun in it.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Speaking of fun, I think there's a lot of great crunchy guitar in the incidental music this week,
yeah.
especially during the chase scenes. So I tip of the uniform hat to Johnny Davis for that.
Yeah, the music is great, and of course, like every time I rewatch the show, that opening sequence is so great. The driving sort of rock theme song, and the cars exploding and jumping over things and people rolling over hoods. I mean, it is like everything I love about T.J. Hooker. The way that the title comes together from two different fonts that come together as one. I mean, it's just classic.
It's classic. Yeah, it's absolutely classic. And of course, theme by Mark Snow, famous composer. Yeah. I mean, he just, even back then, he really, I think, had his powers, all of his powers.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think it's one of the great TV show themes of all time.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about action. This week's big stunt is a doozy. After chasing Foster across a mall, through an obligatory painting class, and over rooftops, Hooker leaps from the second story and brings Foster down, destroying a flower seller stand in the process.
Yeah.
It's no leaping onto a speeding car, but it's a nice change up from the usual. I give it 7 broken collarbones out of 10.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, I was really disappointed that we didn't have, in the episode I get to talk about with you, that we didn't have him hanging onto the hood of a car, because that is so iconic Hooker, right?
Sure.
But yeah, that flying leap is great. And you got to say that the chase scene, the foot chase scene through the mall, the crowded mall, after, they're trying to get him for this rapist after his second attack. And, I counted, and that guy takes down 14 different people, like totally just tackles them as he runs through that mall. And so you totally get him like anybody that rapist runs into. It's like he purposely runs into them to knock to the ground.
Right. Sometimes like when somebody's
a rapist, but he's a serial, knocker over.
Right.
I mean, he's a serial tackler.
It's like when somebody chases somebody through like the back way in a restaurant, and they tip a thing of plates over. He's tipping people over.
That's right. You got to hit every waiter on the way through, and this guy hits like every shopper in that mall.
Yeah.
And of course, he runs through like a group of people painting. He knocks over their paintings. He knocks over fruit stands and people. I mean, anything they could put in his way, he just plows through it.
Yeah.
I mean, He's just totally a running back going through the line, knocking everything over.
That's all part of his. That's part of his strategy, I guess.
I think so. Maybe, maybe like if he feels like if he knocks somebody down hard enough, like Hooker will have to stop and help him. But Hooker's not falling for that.
No, Hooker doesn't.
I mean, he could rip somebody's head off, and Hooker is not going to stop and call an ambulance. He is going to track down that guy. He's going to get his man.
That's right. And the strategy in general of the villain kind of confuses me, because one thing that I really like about Larry Foster is that they set him up. The screenwriter, the show sets him up as the perfect example of this. He's a lawyer, so he knows the tricks, and you can see why McGuire would get so frustrated with this guy. And he's pretty smart. Like, when he's in the lineup, he does that little trick, where he sort of leers at her, and
that's a great moment. Yeah. So for people who haven't watched the episode in a while, they do the lineup, and because the person who raped her was wearing a mask, they've got them all wearing black masks, and they have them all repeat the line that he says, and she's pretty sure that the third guy is the guy who did it, and she thinks it's the lawyer. And on the way out, it's this really great dramatic moment. He yanks that hood off and shows her that it really is him.
Right.
And of course, it's a great lawyer trick, because now, like, her testimony, is called into question. Did she only know that because it's him? Was she picking him out of the lineup?
Yeah. Was she?
Does she have some sort of vendetta against him personally? It's totally stuff you could use in court. It's a great dramatic moment.
It's really smart and devious on his part. But and also I like when, even at the end, after he's been copped and McGuire's going to take him out to the zoo, And his excuse to the guy on duty is, "Oh, I'm taking to be arraigned." And and he's like, "There's no felony arraignment after 3 o'clock." Like, he knows all the rules. Like, he knows the system.
This guy knows the rules. He's like, "Wait, you can't do that."
Right.
Like, there's somebody at after 3 o'clock. So that's when Paul has to pull the gun and go
of course.
and go real commando on him.
And so that makes me wonder, just like, he's very smart sometimes and he's kind of stupid sometimes. Like, if you're walking away from the scene of a crime that you've committed and somebody yells, your name, he immediately takes off running and then, of course, knocks every single thing over within sight. Yeah. So that wasn't too smart. But
no, not too smart. And stuffing your clothes that you were wearing when you raped somebody into a trash can in the stairwell and really not making sure it goes all the way into the trash can, probably not the smartest decision. I know he's in a hurry, and so we have to give him a little leeway for that. Sure. But I still think I would have tried to make the evidence disappear a little bit better.
Yeah. Speaking of evidence, let's talk about, in our usual segment, it's not due process, it's don't process, where we look at the sometimes unorthodox methods our heroes use in the war against crime. I think this week it's all on Paul McGuire. He thinks he's so smart when he breaks into Foster's place, takes that gun and he plants it at the scene. But of course, he ends up busting up the collar that Hooker had already set up. Yeah,
Hooker's got this covered. We actually see Hooker do some real straightforward police work instead of just shooting it out with somebody once. And then Paul has to go and ruin it all. And, it's good old fashioned police work to plant some evidence, I guess. But
it makes me wonder if Paul might have done this on some earlier cops.
Yeah. He seems like he kind of he has that scene with Val where I really like this scene with Val where she's telling him maybe we should just forget it. And I actually thought that I don't know how much what kind of experience Alison Hawke, the writer, had with this kind of thing. But I thought that the treatment of Val after the rape was really well done and carefully done. She's a person who's broken, but she's also a person who's angry. She's a person who is also ashamed, and she's dealing with a lot of the emotions that I think real rape victims must go through. And so she's having this real heart to heart with her father. And she's like, maybe we should just drop it.
Yeah.
Like, maybe we should just let it go. And it's heartbreaking, of course, because you're like, oh my gosh, no, you need to get justice. You need to bring this guy in and make sure he doesn't do this again. But you also realize that for her, as long as her father continues to make this his personal crusade, it's never going to go away for her.
Yeah. That's a good observation. And, I think we see that too in the character of Marcy Wade, played by Judith Flanagan, who's one of the former victims, who herself has just apparently decided to live with this. I mean, she's working at the courthouse with this guy. And I think that it's a great example by Allison, the writer, showing how women, I think a lot of times, can't feel like they can't find justice, and so they have to subsume, their grief and their rage over what's happened to them. But of course, they get some revenge in this at the end.
Right, Hooker is there to stand up for all women and to bring this guy to justice. So so to get back to your point, though, we feel like this Paul McGuire character has maybe done this before, because after that heartfelt conversation, he gets up in his members only jacket and he leaves the house, and he knows exactly what he's going to do. He goes and he waits until our rapist has left his house. He picks the lock, he gets inside there, and we don't see what happens next, but we kind of know what's going to happen. And we know that he's either planting evidence there, or it turns out borrowing evidence that he's going to then plant. He finds the gun that this guy uses and then puts it back at the scene of the crime, which leads us to that great scene where he's kind of telling Hooker knows that it's been planted. And we get this, really Hooker's in the DA's office, and he's explaining that he's got the case all wrapped up. And the DA's now telling us, but weirdly, he used a knife this time and not a gun. And then we have a detective come in with the gun wrapped up in, about 20 yards of plastic wrap, and sets it on the desk and says, look what we just found at the crime scene. And Hooker's like, what crime scene? The first crime scene?
Right.
And he knows right then what Paul's done, because, of course, Hooker and Romano had to go over that parking garage with a fine-tooth comb.
Of course. Sure.
They spent hours after that scene that we saw just pouring through that place looking for that gun and didn't find it.
Yeah.
And we have this great sort of zoom in close up, right up on Hooker's face, where that moment of revelation happens. That's and he knows what's going on. So, I think that this is a case where where definitely McGuire is playing that role of rogue cop, if you will.
Right.
And so we have to, usually that's a Hooker role, but now we've got a guest star doing it this week.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the wingtip on another foot there.
Yeah.
It makes me question Foster's MO again, though. Like, how bad does this guy need to rape? Like, his favorite gun is missing, and so he's like, no, I got a knife. I'll just do it.
I got a butterfly knife. Let's just use that.
Sure.
And it's not enough, too, that he knows that the cops are all over this and looking out. So he's like, yeah, I'll wait. A day, and let's do this again.
It's
and
11:30
knows his next victim's name and is using it. So
right, exactly, yeah.
How many jazzercise classes is this guy in?
This guy, his poster is up in every gym around town, I think.
It must be, yeah.
There's a lot of great hard-boiled dialogue in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite lines involves Foster when he asks, hey, do I look like a rapist? And Hooker says, you tell me what a rapist looks like, and I'll show you what a cop's daughter looks like after she's been raped.
Yeah. I know, right? It's like so hardcore, yeah. And I like, later on when in that scene between Shatner and Nimoy, he says, like Hooker tells McGuire, you're up to your armpits in emotion.
That's right.
You're about to put everything you've worked for on the line. I love that, up to your armpits in emotion. Yeah. I mean, it's just, you can really kind of smell it. It's awesome.
Right, yes. And there's a lot of funny dialogue, too. Of course, we get the typical happy ending in this episode. He gets his gift for opening the account. It's not a clock radio like he wanted. It's a teddy bear. And, of course, he says, this is a teddy bear. I'm a tough policeman. I want a clock radio.
Yeah. And then, and Romano's like, well, she doesn't work there anymore. And then we get the teddy bear in the face, which, I mean, honestly, who hasn't wanted to throw a teddy bear in the face of Vince Romano at one point or another in the show? So it's a really nice moment. It's a good laugh.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. And I'm sure, the way that Romano hops from bed to bed, I'm sure he's had a teddy bear or two thrown in his face.
I'll bet you're right. He has. Yeah. Oh, and I wanted to point out too, like, I know that we don't have one of our patented Hooker hood of the car chase scenes, but I do like that when they get their with from the police garage where it's just being tuned up, and it's on the heels of one of these funny scenes where he's on the phone, where Hooker's on the phone with the bank, and like, like whoever's running the computer is really stupid, and they're like, oh, you run the computer? Sorry about that, and they hang up on it. So they get their car because, Romano comes in, they've got a new lead, and he peels out. Like, he just, peels out leaving the garage.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I wonder if the garage guys like that, because it's awesome and cool, or if they're like, dude, a little less wear on the rubber, thank you. Right. And, we didn't need the scorched rubber smell after you left.
Right. They're probably like, hey, peel out in your own car, Hooker. Oh, wait, you can't. It was repoed.
Exactly. Yeah, which, of course, is our great running gag. And I do love, look, for nostalgia value, I really love rewatching these episodes because I love looking at L.A., back in the 80s.
Oh,
and
sure.
It's really neat to see, Hooker and Romano driving through sort of classic 1980s, Los Angeles. We see, ads for strip clubs and things that I'm sure they didn't actually, that's all real Hollywood at the time, real LA.
Yeah, it never really said, of course, as everyone knows, where this is set, but clearly LA.
Right. People who say that it's maybe Los Angeles County, that the LCPD.
Right.
I kind of like thinking that it's Liberty City. I thought that would be a kind of funny way, looking at the Liberty City Police Department.
Sure. Yeah, that would make sense.
There is an episode called Grand Theft Auto later on.
That's true. That is true.
Tori Spelling is in it.
That's right.
So at least we get a little bit of car stuff. Oh, and one of my favorite gags they do on a lot of Hooker shows. So we see them driving along, Hooker and Romano are in their cruiser, and we see plenty of cars on the road behind them. Mm-hmm. But then they get word that there's been another rape, and they pull a quick U-turn in an intersection and peel out.
Right.
And of course, there's no cars anywhere on the road behind them. Just a second ago they were, So, I mean, it's little gags like that I think are also a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think I've seen that specific U-turn in a couple episodes.
Yeah. I think there's actually a few. Tread marks on that same intersection where they practiced it.
Right. Well, as we wrap up here, you have any last thoughts about this episode?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great one. I mean, vengeance is such a primitive human instinct. I mean, it's one of the reasons that movies like Taken are such a big hit today, and that all the way back to the Count of Monte Cristo. I mean, vengeance is something that we can all understand. And if you're going to write an episode and have such high stakes and high drama right from the start, having somebody who has something really personal like this happen to them is really, I think it's a great way to go, because it immediately grabs us and pulls us in. I think that it's one of the strongest T.J. Hooker episodes. I know that it breaks the kind of format that we're used to, where we meet the criminal and there's some sort of moral dilemma for Hooker, and there's an informant that helps him out,
right,
and maybe a love interest. And then, of course, there's always some strip club scene, and that we don't get that in this one either.
Right.
So I think, but we do get the final chase, and we get that satisfaction of wrapping everything up with a joke. So there's some classic Hooker. I think what we're seeing is first season was a mid-season replacement.
Right.
And so they were really just kind of getting their legs in the first season. And this is sort of early middle second season.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is right when Hooker was really coming into its own. Like, we're starting to see some of the most powerful and the best episodes of this show ever.
Yeah, this is and sometimes you have to break the format to get some of your best episodes. Yeah, this is great early Hooker, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I always like to see Hooker have conflict with the people he's working with, and not just the maggots on the streets, because we always get more development out of Hooker as a cop. And Shatner puts in some good work, and he's really good with Nimoy. They should work together more.
Yeah, it's a shame that they never had another chance to do any. I know Nimoy directed him in Decoy,
right,
but I always hoped that they would bring the Paul McGuire character back. You felt like these two could have been like partners, or like a captain and a lieutenant or something, where they were working together. It would have been cool to see a whole show about these two guys, solving crimes or something.
Yeah, if they had pulled the trigger on him moving to Chicago for season 5, he
right,
could have been,
yeah,
his captain, or maybe just his retired friend who's giving him advice and stuff like that.
Or you could have done the same thing. The TV movie that they made after the series was canceled was set in Hawaii,
right?
And that would have been cool. You could have had Paul McGuire retire to Hawaii and then be like an older, because I don't know if he's going to get his badge back after this, honestly, after what he's done.
Right.
I mean, you don't pull a guy out of the holding cell at the gunpoint and then they say welcome back. I don't know the way policing is today in America. Maybe you do, but it would be cool to have him be retired and be that guy who's the advisor kind of character. It could have. I don't know. I guess Magnum really defined the Hawaii.
Yeah, everybody
it
wanted
wasn't
to go to Hawaii after that. Yeah,
yeah. This could have been a pretty great show too.
Well, a Magnum and T.J. Hooker team up would have been really great too.
Oh my gosh, that would have been fabulous, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
Magnum's always flashing back to Vietnam. Maybe in they could have a flashback thing where it's Hooker and Magnum in Vietnam.
Oh, that would have been amazing. And didn't they do a crossover between Magnum and Murder, She Wrote?
Oh,
that's just me remembering my 80s TV. So we'll have to look that up after the episode.
Yeah, I'll have to ask my friend on Murder She Casted.
I think that would have been so awesome to have that, or like a Hooker and we talked about Hooker sort of crossover would have been amazing.
Sure.
Or what would have even been better is like a Sledgehammer crossover with T.J. Hooker. Do you remember that show? That was a lot of fun.
Yes, of course.
And they both took out a lot of guys. Of course, Sledgehammer being a comedy, we would have had to see a little bit more of Shatner's comedy chops.
Oh,
but that would have been a lot of fun.
He could have handled that, no problem.
He totally could do it.
Yeah.
He's got all those skills in his arsenal.
Yeah. Well, I think we can close the book on this one. Next time on LCPOD, a young prostitute is killed by her pimp, and Hooker has to find a former prostitute that witnessed the killing before her pimp does. Clarence Williams III guest stars in Sweet 16 and Dead, an episode directed by William Shatner. That's going to be a great one.
Oh, yeah, I'd forgotten that. That's right, yeah.
As always, you can join the conversation with other hookheads on our social media, on Twitter at LCPOD, and on Facebook. I think that's it for this show. I'm your host, Captain Kaliban, signing off for Officer Alan Gratz, saying keep your head down and the streets safe.